The Color Out of Space, Part 5. 3 days later, Nahum lurched into Ami's kitchen in the early morning, and in the absence of his host stammered out a desperate tale once more, while Mrs. Pierce listened in a clutching fright. It was little Merwin this time. He was gone. He had gone out late at night with a lantern and pail for water, and had never come back. He'd been going to pieces for days, and hardly knew what he was about, screamed at everything. There had been a frantic shriek from the yard then, but before the father could get to the door, the boy was gone. There was no glow from the lantern he had taken, and of the child himself, no trace. At the time, Nahum thought the lantern and pail were gone too, but when dawn came, and the man had plodded back from his all-night search of the woods and fields, he had found some very curious things near the well. There was a crushed and apparently somewhat melted mass of iron, which had certainly been the lantern, while a bale and twisted iron hoops beside it, both half fused, seemed to hint at the remnants of the pail. That was all. Nahum was past imagining. Mrs. Pierce was blank, and Ami, when he reached home and heard the tale, could give no guess. Merwin was gone, and there would be no use in telling the people around, who shunned all gardeners now. No use either in telling the city people at Arkham, who laughed at everything. Thad had gone, and now Murney was gone. Something was creeping and waiting to be seen and felt and heard. Nahum would go soon, and he wanted Ami to look after his wife and Zenas if they survived him. It must all be a judgment of some sort, though he could not fancy what for, since he had always walked uprightly in the Lord's ways, so far as he knew. For over 2 weeks Ami saw nothing of Nahum, and then, worried about what might have happened, he overcame his fears and paid the Gardner place a visit. There was no smoke from the great chimney, and for a moment the visitor was apprehensive of the worst. The aspect of the whole farm was shocking: grayish, withered grass and leaves on the ground, vines falling in brittle wreckage from archaic walls and gables, and great bare trees clawing up at the gray November sky, with a studied malevolence which Ami could not but feel had come from some subtle change in the tilt of the branches. But Nahum was alive after all. He was weak, and lying on a couch in the low-ceiled kitchen, but perfectly conscious and able to give simple orders to Zenas. The room was deadly cold, and as Ami visibly shivered, the host shouted huskily to Zenas for more wood. Wood, indeed, was sorely needed, since the cavernous fireplace was unlit and empty, with a cloud of soot billowing about in the chill wind that came down the chimney. Presently Nahum asked him if the extra wood had made him any more comfortable, and then Ami saw what had happened. The stoutest cord had broken at last, and the hapless farmer's mind was proof against more sorrow. Questioning tactfully, Ami could get no clear idea at all about the missing Zenas. In the well. He lives in the well, was all that the clouded father would say. Then there flashed across the visitor's mind a sudden thought of the mad wife, and he changed his line of inquiry. "Nabby? Why, here she is," was the surprised response of poor Nahum, and Ami soon saw that he must search for himself. Leaving the harmless babbler on the couch, he took the keys from their nail beside the door and climbed the creaking stairs to the attic. It was very close and noisome up there, and no sound could be heard from any direction. Of the 4 doors in sight, only one was locked, and on this he tried various keys on the ring he had taken. The 3rd key proved the right one, and after some fumbling, Ami threw open the low white door. It was quite dark inside, for the window was small and half obscured by the crude wooden bars, and Ami could see nothing at all on the wide planked floor. The stench was beyond enduring, and before proceeding further he had to retreat to another room and return with his lungs filled with breathable air. When he did enter, he saw something dark in the corner, and upon seeing it more clearly, he screamed outright. While he screamed, he thought a momentary cloud eclipsed the window, and a second later he felt himself brushed as if by some hateful current of vapor. Strange colors danced before his eyes, and had not a present horror numbed him, he would have thought of the globule in the meteor that the geologist's hammer had shattered, and of the morbid vegetation that had sprouted in the spring. As it was, he thought only of the blasphemous monstrosity which confronted him, and which all too clearly had shared the nameless fate of young Thaddeus and the livestock. But the terrible thing about this horror was that it very slowly and perceptibly moved as it continued to crumble. Ami would give me no added particulars to this scene, but the shape in the corner does not reappear in his tale as a moving object. There are things which cannot be mentioned, and what is done in common humanity is sometimes cruelly judged by the law. I gather that no moving thing was left in that attic room, and that to leave anything capable of motion there would have been a deed so monstrous as to damn any accountable being to eternal torment. Anyone but a stolid farmer would have fainted or gone mad, but Ami walked conscious through that low doorway and locked the accursed secret behind him. There would be Nahum to deal with now. He must be fed and tended and removed to some place where he could be cared for. Commencing his descent of the dark stairs, Ami heard a thud below him. He even thought a scream had suddenly been choked off, and recalled nervously the clammy vapor which had brushed by him in that frightful room above. A presence had his cry and entry started up. Halted by some vague fear, he heard still further sounds below. Indubitably there was a sort of heavy dragging, and a most detestably sticky noise, as of some fiendish and unclean species of suction. With an associative sense goaded to feverish heights, he thought unaccountably of what he had seen upstairs. Good God! What eldritch dream world was this into which he had blundered? He dared move neither backward nor forward, but stood there trembling at the black curve of the boxed-in staircase. Every trifle of the scene burned itself into his brain. The sounds, the sense of dread expectancy, the darkness, the steepness of the narrow steps, and, merciful heaven, the faint but unmistakable luminosity of all the woodwork in sight, steps, sides, exposed lathes, and beams alike. Then there burst forth a frantic whinny from Ami's horse outside, followed at once by a clatter which told of a frenzied runaway. In another moment horse and buggy had gone beyond earshot, leaving the frightened man on the dark stairs to guess what had sent them, but that was not all. There had been another sound out there, a sort of liquid splash. Water. It must have been the well. He had left Hero untied near it, and the buggy wheel must have brushed the coping and knocked in a stone, and still the pale phosphorescence glowed in that detestably ancient woodwork. God, how old the house was! Most of it built before 1670, and the gambrel roof not later than 1730. A feeble scratching on the floor downstairs now sounded distinctly, and Ami's grip tightened on a heavy stick he had picked up in the attic for some purpose. Slowly nerving himself, he finished his descent and walked boldly toward the kitchen. But he did not complete the walk, because what he sought was no longer there. It had come to meet him, and it was still alive, after a fashion. Whether it had crawled or whether it had been dragged by any external force, Ami could not say, but the death had been at it. Everything had happened in the last half-hour, but collapse, graying, and disintegration were already far advanced. There was a horrible brittleness, and dry fragments were scaling off. Ami could not touch it, but looked horrifiedly into the distorted parody that had been a face. "What is it, Nahum? What is it?" he whispered, and the cleft, bulging lips were just able to crackle out a final answer. "Nothing. Nothing. The color burns, cold and wet, but it burns. It lived in well. I seen it. Kind of smoke, just like the flowers last spring. Suck sucking the life out of everything. In that stone. Must have come in that stone. Poison the whole place. Don't know what it wants. That round thing them men in college dug out in a stone. He smashed it. It was that same color. Just the same. Like the flowers and plants. Must have been more of seeds. Seeds. They growed. I seen it the first time this week. As it got strong on Dennis. He was a big boy, full of life. Beats down your mind, and then gets you. Burns you up. In the well water. He was right about that. Evil water. Zenith's never come back from the well. Can't get away. Draws you. You know summit's coming. Tain't no use. I seen it time and again since Zenith took. Worse than heavy, Ami. My head's no good. Dunno how long Senta fed her. And it'll get her if we ain't careful. Just a color. Her face is getting to have that color sometimes toward night. And it burns and sucks. It come from some place where things ain't as they is here. One of them professors said so. He was right. Look out, Amy. It'll do some more. Sucks.